Hey, I'm Shaye Wanner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Folks, today we are visiting with Emma Coffman about her experiences as a first-generation beef producer. She is going to walk us through her story as well as share advice for how others can get involved as producers without having a family operation to return to. This is a little more tailored to people who maybe want to get involved on a little bit larger scale instead of kind of the homesteading aspect of it. And so I really appreciate her perspective of that and her approach to it. So this conversation is full of great advice, but if you want even more advice and stories similar to this, Emma has a ton on her website. So after this conversation, be sure to head to that website by going to the link in the show notes. But with that, let's visit with Emma. Grazing without limits and ranching without boundaries. Unlock the full potential of every acre with SenseHub Fence, the smarter way to manage your cattle herd. Cut costs, conserve resources, control grazing across even the toughest terrain with virtual fencing that combines real-time herd data with powerful hands-off precision. Profit, sustainability, and efficiency all in one system. SenseHub Vents puts smarter grazing at your fingertips, saving you time, effort, and money compared to traditional fencing. Ready to transform your ranch? Learn more at ventsfence.com, and that link is in the show notes. Well, Emma, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I know I've had your name on my list of people to ask to be on the show for a while, so I'm glad we could make it work, and I did ask, and even through the rescheduling, we are here, and we're going to have a great conversation today, so thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, to help the listeners get to know you a little bit better, can you explain why you bet on the beef industry?
Absolutely. So I'm first generation. I did not come from a agriculture background, and so I had to learn the elementary level of the industry all the way up now to what I would consider more advanced knowledge in just resources, technologies, and different areas of the livestock industry. And so through that education, I realized that we're not educating the consumer as well as we could and should be. Consumers should know that beef is one of the top protein choices out in the market. Consumers should know that 3 ounces of beef equals more than 25 grams of protein and 10 essential amino acids. We shouldn't be teaching and showcasing why beef is not only sustainable, but honestly a necessary component of environmental sustainability as well as food sustainability in not just here in the United States, but internationally. And so the business, the more I learn about it, the more addicted I get to learning more. It's like a rabbit hole you just can't get yourself out of. And so that's one of my passions is educating not only consumers, but also fellow as well.
Well, absolutely, and I always appreciate the different perspectives I get from this particular question, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about your experience as a first-generation rancher today, but you definitely do a lot of advocacy work and have been very much recognized for that throughout the industry, so kudos to you for that. We need more people doing that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So if you are first generation, I'm curious, how did you become involved in ranching? What did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm first gen. My mom was military, my dad was in finance. And I think I first caught the livestock bug, if you will, when I was in 4-H. And all my friends were showing livestock, and I have FOMO on a crippling basis. And so I told my parents, hey, I really want to do this. And we had no property we didn't live in a subdivision per se, but we didn't really live in an area where just building a barn was really a option. So I found a producer that was on our way to and from school, and I asked him if he'd be willing to help me house my projects, and he didn't do anything outside of just owning the property and paying the property taxes. And so I did all the feeding and everything, but that just really got me hooked. And I knew that this was just a very niche part of the livestock industry, that there had to be much more out there. I just didn't know what that was. And so when I went to college, that really opened my doors and exposure into different areas of the industry. I was heavily involved in the sheep industry, the cattle industry, and the Western performance horse side. I call it my love triangle, and I knew that if I landed in one of those areas that I would probably be happy. I just didn't know what. I loved reproduction, but I didn't want to go get my vet degree to just be able to breed cows or sheep for the rest of my life. And so just through God, I got the chance to going to Australia, and that exposed me to international livestock systems, which just got me even more excited because I thought, well, why aren't we talking about what's going on in other countries? We're not communicating that very well here in the United States, or at least I didn't know this even existed. And so I think that really, if I'm being honest, planted the seed for where I'm at today on the advocacy route, is trying to bridge not only consumers and producers together, but also producers to other producers within the United States and across the world. Because what's going on in Australia may or may not fit your operation, but there might be a component that you can implement back home. And so when I came back from Australia, it was COVID. I didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't want to get my master's, but my visa got declined to go abroad because of, again, COVID. And that's where I got my first job in the nutrition realm. So my first job out of college, I swore I would never be a nutrition salesman. Never say never. My first job was a nutrition salesman in Virginia, of all places. I'd never set foot in Virginia. My first day there was a snowstorm. I'm like, I am way out of my element. What is this fescue thing? So it was a lot of learning, a lot of education, and I just took opportunities as they came about. So I was there for a little over a year, and then Zoetis approached me with a position with their precision animal health division, working with smaller end grow yards and feed yards. So I went from the nutrition route, moved over back to Texas, covering Oklahoma and New Mexico as well. There I got an exposure into the feedlot industry, the stocker industry, and how that all worked together. And then when that division got sold off to a buyer, I then managed a ranch of what used to be one of my customers. And that really got me hands-on day-to-day exposure as a manager. So I love working cattle. I've worked as a day worker before, but not as a manager. And so that's really where I got my, would you say, boots on the ground type of experience. I was there for a short time, and then I got approached by a IVF company and covering 5 states this time. And now I was working with Elite Genetics from the stock show side, from the seed stock side. And that really almost tied each industry I was in together into a full circle. So again, now we're dealing with what can work for somebody may not work for you, but you can still take a component of it and incorporate it into your operation. And I loved my ability and just opportunity God gave me to get experience in each of those, almost like just different sides of the Rubik's Cube. And I'm like, okay, now I know how it all works together. How can I articulate this to help people who may never get that opportunity? And that's just where I'm here today. The IVF company I was with had pretty big layoffs. Over half the company left, and I was the last one hired. And so as corporate goes, and I was really unsatisfied, not with the company per se, but with what is your why? We talk about that a lot. And my why has always been learning myself, getting hands-on experience for myself, but then teaching others. Doesn't matter if you're in or outside the industry. So that's when I took Double E Ranch Advocacy full-time. Double E Ranch, the name of it comes from my first name and my middle name, the initials put together, because of my delusional brain, I thought I'd be married by now. So while I don't operate on a ranch every single day, I do partner in with some cattle. I have horses, and we run just logistically and then also financially, we run it that way. But that's where the branding Double E Ranch Advocacy came from, was that I wanted to be a part of the industry and still advocate and do what I love. And now I get to do all 3 of those things and share it with quite literally the world.
You packed a lot into a 5-year time frame.
Yes, I did.
So I'm curious, with all that you did, I mean, those were a lot of different diverse experiences, like you were talking about, kind of getting all sides of the Rubik's Cube. What do you feel like now is the main area that you are really trying to lean into and learn as a first generation producer? I mean, I know you said you don't technically have your own place, but you're still partnering with cattle. You're still boots on the ground. You're still doing a lot of that. So what are you really trying to lean in and learn now?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's one of my biggest things is throughout all of the consumer facing and then also producer facing side, I want to make that abundantly clear that you don't have to own cattle to be in this industry. You can be a researcher, you can be an engineer, you can be in sales, you can be in so many different areas outside of owning livestock. And I try to demonstrate that to not only people who are in the industry that may not want to take over the family's place but still be tied in the ag industry, or people who are just entering in. So personally what I do is I'm looking at the technology side. There's a lot of different opportunities out there. There's a lot of different businesses, softwares that are out there to help be more efficient in our livestock systems here in the United States. And I say and emphasize the word efficient. We are not replacing. There are things that a machine will never be able to replace. Intuition, gut feeling, sights. Computers and AIs are a great tool, but is never meant to be a full replacement. And all it's doing is allowing either managers or employees to have more time to go do other things that computers can't do. So if we can help monitor temperatures of calves in a feedlot through a tag in the ear or a bolus in their gut, and it can tell us 6-7 hours before they show physical symptoms, and we can already be out there pulling that calf and monitoring. Not only does that help with sustainability for our food supply, because we are in low cattle numbers right now, but it also, one of the biggest issues we have in the nation is labor. And labor is expensive. Not only is it expensive, but it's hard to find. And so if we can have our very limited labor force be targeted in their efforts and time more towards more efficient and more priorities, right? That to-do list. And we can let computers and technology take care of the mundane day-to-day things, whether it's running feed reports or conversion rates, whatever analytics on the back end. We can marry those two together. And so that's probably been one of my most recent passions, if you will, is discovering what is applicable, and not only just for bigger operations, but also your day-to-day consumer. I think a lot of times, maybe some companies out there who are trying to develop a product, to create a solution, looking for the problem, and not vice versa. So again, it's part of the producer's responsibility to voice, hey, what can you create or invent or develop to help me on my day-to-day?
Absolutely. There are so many cool technologies out there that are, I almost want to say, finally hitting the ranching space that are really going to be beneficial to us. So Emma, I'm curious, I've had first generation producers on the show before, and I always appreciate their stories because I'm fifth generation. So it's not something that I've experienced. I have a very different story, and every first generation producer I have on has their own unique story, how they go about it, how they get involved. And so it's been fun to hear that. But I'm curious, I've had a few people reach out on social media to me and saying, what tips do you have for beginning producers? And I don't feel like I'm necessarily the best one to answer that question. So I'm curious from your perspective, if there are people who want to be first generation producers or maybe grew up in agriculture but aren't going back to the family place, what 2 to 3 tips would you share with them to help them get a good start?
That's a great question, and one I get quite frequently. For those who are coming into the industry, if you want to be in the production realm, I think that's a very different track than if you are just looking for a job into the industry to see if it is something you want to be a part of. If you want to be a producer, and if you want to be a homesteader, that's fine, but I feel like there's a difference between homesteaders and actual producer. Right now, everybody wants to have chickens. They want to have, a couple of goats or a couple of short, fluffy cows here and there. But the reality is that it is a very intensive, labor-intensive, financially intensive decision that you're making. You're not just buying the property. You're buying and having to budget in your property taxes. You're having to budget in nutrition supplementation. You're having to budget in, if you are buying a property that maybe isn't the best in forage, what are you going to have to supplement? Are you going to have to rotationally graze your livestock so that way you can help regenerate? And I just talked to a guy that took him 14 years to finally get a pasture to where he really wanted it to be. And it wasn't a very big pasture. I think it was about 10 or 15 acres. Now, granted, that's his hobby is grass. He just has cows, so he can grow more grass. But just to have a nutritionally dense location for his cattle, there's a lot of patience, there's a lot of finances. So the first thing I would say is you need to understand the numbers. I hate numbers when it comes to the dollar signs, unless there's like, it's a check coming to me. I don't like the taxes side of things, the finances, the what kind of programs does the USDA or NRCS office offer for people to take into their own operation. There's a lot of different programs out there. So just know that it is very financially intense. Buying the property is not enough. You need to have a business plan. You need to have a business structure, and you need to have a target goal for what your operation is going to accomplish. Are you running, and that can change, but you need to have a target consumer base. Are you running program cattle, meaning are you going to do organics? Are you going to do an HTC? Are you going to be completely grass-fed and finished? Or are you going to be conventional? Okay, so how are you going to market those cattle? Are you going to be purebred? Are you going to be composites? Are you buying and just turn and go? So there's a lot of different options, and it can be overwhelming, but you need to figure out what you want to do and then what property type you're buying and if it will accommodate and support that business model. That would be my big piece of advice and that's a big chunk. So I feel like that's 3 in 1 right there. So there's that for producers. If you are wanting to be in the industry side but not actually own livestock yourself, and you're just wanting to get exposure and education in the industry, submit your dang resume, ask the dang question, go up and shake people's hands. I always tell college students the who you know is the cake and the what you know is just the icing. There's a lot of things I've learned out in the field and on the job that I would never have learned in a 4-year educational institution. I always say don't let schooling get in the way of your education, and I stand by that, which is probably why universities only ask me to come speak once to their classes, but I do stand by that. I have had people help get me ahead in my career more than the actual job. Obviously, the job is very important. I'm very competitive. I did my little Gallup traits just for the Trailblazers a week and a half ago, and of course, the number 1 trait I had was competitiveness, go figure, but the numbers help continue my growth in the industry, but it's the people. And the people in the livestock and the ag industry in itself, they will treat you like family. And then, of course, there's a few bad apples here and there. That's with everything. But if you invest in your customers and in your relationships, that is a irreplaceable relationship. That's a bond that money can't buy. And it's a very easily detectable whether or not you are for the producer or if you're just out there to make a buck. So take your jobs with intention, even if it's something completely foreign. That I had no nutrition experience. I had a C in nutrition in college. And then I was top 1% of one of the largest nutrition companies, arguably in the world. And for me, that was obviously a big ego boost moment. Like, okay, I can do this. Then I left, and same thing. I never set foot on a feed yard. But now I was working with one of the top pharmaceutical companies in the nation trying to sell a product. And it's, on paper, you're like, okay, why should we hire this girl? She's got 0 feedlot experience. But if you're just determined and you're determined to learn and you're open to learn, you'll go way farther in life than what you'll expect yourself to be.
I think that's some really solid advice. But, you're talking about the networking and communication aspect. I think that applies on both ends. That applies no matter what job or field you are in, because we're all learning. We're all learning.
Absolutely. And I think, too, once you get yourself established in the industry, give back. Give back. Sometimes I get college students asking me questions that I'm like, really? But then I remember, I was like, I was that college student. I was that person that texted you once and I was so scared that I was annoying you and I didn't double text you, or I didn't double email you, or I didn't follow up. Just be persistent, because once you start getting a schedule and you get really busy, I didn't realize how difficult it was to remember to get in contact with people back until I was in that position. And so a college student or just a person in general, if you're wanting that relationship and you just send that one text, that one LinkedIn message, that one email, that's not enough. That's not enough, especially if you're asking for a favor like time and connections and resources. Just be persistent. But if, again, once you are in that position to offer advice, please do it. Please do it. I'm a big, big believer in giving back, because I would not be here if people didn't do that and they didn't charge me a dime. People like my professors, just other industry partnerships, they didn't charge me for their advice. And while looking back, yes, I would have written whatever very little money I had in my bank account in college at the time, I would have just handed it over now that I know what I do. But I almost look down on people who are in the industry that charge others for their expertise if it's not a consultative role. If you are just talking to college students, talking to high school students, talking to kids in FFA or 4-H, you need to be generous with your time, because someone took a chance on you, and you to not do that, I think is, I hate to say the word selfish, but I think it is.
Yeah, I think there's a delicate balance there. Like you said, if it's a consulting role or service, it's a little bit different. But I always have a soft spot for kids myself because I got a lot of free advice from a lot of great people as well. So now, I'm just curious. So, we talked about how you're involved in the industry today and your past, and you gave a lot of solid advice there about, if you want to be a producer, like knowing your numbers, and like you said, that piece of land isn't enough. But I'm curious, if you have cattle that you're partnered on today, how did you go about establishing those relationships? Can you talk about that process? Because I think that is something that might be enticing to more people, just because I'm assuming it's less capital intensive for you, because you don't have to necessarily have all of the resources right there. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that side of it in case people are interested in that route?
Absolutely. I actually just got done talking with a producer a little over a week ago, and he has a way better success story than I do. He actually brought investors. So he doesn't own the land. A group of investors own the land. The cattle that they run are, part of them are solely his and his wife's, but then a good chunk of the herd is actually partnered cattle. So he had actually managed a ranch, and I forget where, but it was in Oklahoma, and he had managed there for, goodness, 5 to 10, maybe 12 years. And he had the experience. He had already the relationships in place. Once he decided and his wife decided that they wanted to do this, they started making phone calls. And if the people they called didn't have the resources or they weren't interested, they got in contact with people who did. Again, it is not always the what you know, it's the who you know. And so, again, most of my relationships came from my corporate experience with dealing with customers, gaining new customers and sales. So it was very much face-to-face, boots on the ground. And then going to conferences, going to trade shows, going to conventions, going to symposiums. And I used to hear this quite a bit, that showing up is the first step. I disagree with that. Showing up, while yes, that is the first step, you have to do something when you show up. It makes zero sense to me for you to fly across the country to go to, let's just say, CattleCon. That's not exactly a cheap location to go to, nor a cheap event to attend. If you're spending darn near $1,000 with all of the different options that you can put into a package, and you don't talk to a single person, you're not doing yourself any favors. You might learn a thing here or there, but if you're trying to get into this industry, it is relationships. You need that. What if your trucker doesn't show up in the middle of the night? All right, who are you going to call? What if you need to sell calves through a sale bar? Maybe even you do want to try selling your calves on a online service. I mean, there's so, like DVM or Superior, there's so many different options. You need to have that relationship with your veterinarian. Which veterinarian do you choose if you have options? What pharmaceutical rep do you choose? Are they there for just to get money out of your pocket, or do they truly want you to buy the best product for your livestock, even if it means buying a cheaper, quote unquote, less dollar value item? So, and same thing, nutrition. And so I took a lot of pay cuts because I had my customers' interest best at heart. And I would never advise them to do something that I wouldn't do. And that got me in a lot of hot water in terms of corporate field. That's part of the reason I went off and did my own thing, was because I got tired of maybe some of the corporate ideologies. And my customers recognized that, they saw that, and they have my respect and I have their respect because of that. So going back again to your question, if you want to do that, you need to know who you're doing business with. I always tell people who are getting into the sales field, not every potential customer should be your customer. Same thing with partnerships. Not every potential partnership should be your partner, because maybe they're better at the legality language than you are. What if there's a loophole and then they just take everything and walk out the door? So you need to know who you're doing business with, and you need to develop those relationships before you ever even think about drawing up papers.
Absolutely. Do you have any other tips that you really want to highlight today?
I'm a big firm believer in quality over quantity. Maybe not so much right now in this market, because this market is, everything is just selling extremely high. But when the market does come down, when the numbers do build up, you really need to focus on your quality of forage, quality of nutrition, quality of genetics, quality of facilities. You don't have to have the biggest, fanciest, and newest product on the market, but you need to have something that the ROI is there. You can buy a cheap product, and I've got, for example, just an easy analogy. You got 2 bales of hay. One is, let's just say, a third of the price than the other one, but that cheaper bale is 2% protein and that higher quality bale is 10%, 12% protein. You're getting more bang for your buck, even though you're spending more money on the forefront. But you need to understand that. Same thing with that smaller bale. It's cheaper and it may look appealing, but you're actually going to buy more of it on the back end and you're going to be spending more money. And so I look at the same, whether it is natural resources like land, whether you're looking at facilities, whether you're looking at genetics of cattle, like, just because one breed may look cute or it may just have a really good association, it's very flashy, doesn't mean that's a breed that's going to thrive in your geographical area. So look at things objectively. Again, keep the finances, as much as we hate doing it, and remind yourself this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is you buying into not only the industry, but it's also buying the experience. You're buying the life. You're not just, this is not crypto. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, Emma, my final question for you before we wrap up today is, if you could start over, is there anything you would do differently?
Oh, absolutely. I think the best answer to that question would be just do it. Just do it. There's a lot of imposter syndrome that I had throughout my different professional careers and through different jobs. Even believing in myself was probably the hardest thing, because there was no one to blame. There was no IT department to call. There was no manager to ask advice for outside of just relationships I had built. Believe in yourself. We all learn, and sometimes getting your nose busted is the best way to prevent mistakes in the future. So for me, I wish I had not been as intimidated because I wasn't, quote unquote, a part of the industry. I wish I wasn't nervous for failure, because really failure is the best teaching method of all.
Absolutely. Fail forward.
That's right.
Well, Emma, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me today and share your story and advice with my audience, whether you are out there and you want to be a first-generation producer, or you were listening and 5th, 6th, or 7th generation producer, wherever you fall. I think we all learned something from Emma, and it's a very inspirational story. So thank you for that. And folks, if you want to connect with Emma, I will include the link to her social media, etc. in the show notes, along with any other resources that were mentioned in the show today. Now, if you want to support this podcast and any of your favorite podcasts that you listen to, remember to leave a rating and review, and better yet, share it with a friend who's going to find value in this information. But with that, happy ranching, folks. Folks, are you ready for more conversations to push your ranch to the next level and keep you thinking about how you can improve as a ranch manager? If you're thinking, heck yeah, then you need to join my free Facebook group, Rising Ranchers, where you can connect and learn from other ranchers and experts, as well as access additional ranching resources. You can find the direct link in the show notes.